Okay, let's talk about choosing samples for arrangement. Now, when I say arrangement, most people will think from bar 1 to bar 219. That's not what we mean. When we're talking about arrangement, we're talking about positions in the mix. Remember what we spoke about before? We've got 20 hertz here, 20,000. We've got the middle, we've got the sides, left, right, forwards in the mix, and backwards in the mix. But the first thing you're going to look at is the frequency of what you're choosing. So is that sample that you're choosing, if it's like we talked about before, lead 8, is that clashing with lead 7? Is that taking away from something that's more important? And can we choose a better sample? At one point of the track, we might have a kick, the bass, the clap, a loop, an open hat, a closed hat, a skippy hat. You know, we might have a shaker, we might have a tambourine. And what I want to know is are all those things cutting through the best that they can within this mix? And that comes from, as we've said before, the source when you're choosing the sound for the arrangement. So we're going to go to lead 1, lead 2, lead 3. Okay. So if I've got, for example, a kick and a bass and a clap, and I wanted to add a loop, but the loop isn't as important in the clap as I love the clap. So I put the loop in, but it's masking the clap. I have to make a decision. Is the loop going up in lead priority, or is the clap staying there? And if the clap is staying there, then I need to perhaps look at pitching the loop up or down, see if that works, or trying a different loop. If the loop's more important and like that, maybe I need to go and choose a clap that works better with that loop. And again, we can try things like pitching that up or down, or saturating it or EQing it. But ideally, we want the source to cut through the mix. We don't want to be looking at saturation and EQ and distortion to make things come through the mix. The source should do that in itself. A big one that I see is when it comes to the top end. And people choose a big open slushy hat, and then they have a 16s hat or a groove hat. And the groove hat, you turn it on and off in the mix and you can't hear it. And you can't feel that groove, but that's what's probably making the track feel a little bit faster and driving to you. So that's because you've chosen the wrong sample for the position in the mix. You might want to choose something that's a lot higher up in the mix, maybe something like an 808 closed hat, which really cuts through a slushy kind of hat. And the same goes with your shakers and your tambourines and everything else you might want to put in. I'm not saying you shouldn't be busy in any certain frequency. That's down to genre and what you really want. But can you choose a better sample for the position in the arrangement at that point in the track? And a lot of the time, this is where people get it wrong. They don't think like what we're talking about now. Okay, I'm adding this now. What's more important? Is it cutting through? And at the end of every track I go through and I mute not just the plugins to see what they're doing, but mute each instrument and see, okay, can I hear it when I mute it come in and out? And if you can't, which I can't a lot of the time, then there's no point having it in the mix. It's just slush. And that slush is taken away from the groove of everything else in the track. So using the 16s hat as an example, change the sample or change the frequency of what you're using. One of the other biggest things about choosing samples for arrangement and at the same time is question and answer, or call and response. You know, a lot of the time you get records and they've got a vocal and you've got a synth playing a slightly different melody over it. But if you just took that vocal and that synth and did a question and answer, the track would groove a lot more. Obviously, the question melody wants to be working with the answer melody. And we're going to go into that later on. In music like dubstep, where we're mixing for loudness, this is exactly how we choose our samples. It's one of the most important things in making this music. So for example, the kick, the bass and the backbeat, the clap or the snare might be the loudest point in that track. And when dubstep producers are producing their music, like Skrillex and everybody else, they'll choose the samples for the position of the mix so they're not all playing at the same time as that backbeat, because they might want to feel that groove, the lead into that backbeat, And they'll also want to get the tracks as loud as possible. And the more things you put onto one position at any one time is going to mean you're not going to be able to get your track as loud. So they will choose sound around the kick, the bass and the clap, if that's the loudest point of the track, and make it so it is question and answer. And I think you can apply that to all genres of house music. What are you trying to achieve with your groove? What are you trying to achieve with the feeling of how it hits that snare or on the offbeat? We're going to talk about that more when we talk about groove next.